Hello and welcome to the annual Write Hive conference. This year is packed with a ton of great sessions for writers, writing professionals, and the publishing industry. Write Hive is a nonprofit serving the writing community with free and inclusive resources, events, programming, connections, and more. The 2026 conference brings you this session, the Elevator Pitch Workshop, with Patchree Jones. As a girl, Patchree Jones grew up watching Thai dramas with her mom and dreamt of being a playwright. While life took her on a different path, her love of stories never faltered. In fact, she truly believes that it takes a fighter to share one's vision with the world, and Patchree hopes to blaze the trail for all readers to go after their dreams unapologetically. Currently, she has published two children's books, Skylight, book one in the Mech trilogy, and The White Elephant of Himapan, an original Thai folklore chapter book. Patchree was recently named a Bookstagram 2025 Awards finalist for Children's Author of the Year. Her first story in the adult fiction sphere will be published in the upcoming In the Words of a Flower anthology with Inked in Gray. Patchree Jones is a Thai-American author and currently lives in Southern California with her husband, two children, and one lazy dog.
Always got to mention the dog. Thank you so much for the intro, Dawn. I definitely appreciate it. So excited to be a part of Write Hive every single year. This is my 5th year participating in the conference and kind of stoked to be an actual presenter for a workshop. So here, thank you guys for coming. This is the Elevator Pitch Workshop. And as we kind of get started, everybody's heard of what the elevator pitch is. So just to jump on in, we're going to take a look at a few pitches. I'm going to overview what we're going to work on today, and then we're going to kind of just take it step by step to see where we're going. So, out of the way, I might cut myself out there. So what I have here, and the way I wanted to start by looking for this particular workshop is looking at some sample elevator pitches. Now I've got 4 here on the screen. I'm not going to read them out, but we can kind of take a moment where everyone kind of reads them to themselves. And in prepping for this particular workshop, I scoured through like way too many pitches, way too many to count, and way too many to think of. And I wanted to find pitches that, one, are for stories or books that we may or may not be familiar with. So maybe some of these might be sticking out to you and you're like, I think I know what that is. And maybe some of them you haven't. Full disclaimer, I have not read any of these books, but in scouring through the pitches, they actually just stuck out to me for several reasons. One, not only for the conciseness of the pitches, but for the way that the authors, or at least their publishing team, was able to kind of highlight key elements of their story. And what you want to think of, and what I want everybody to kind of consider thinking about, is why is it that they seem so appealing? Why would these pitches seem appealing to us? And then recognizing that these particular pitches are actually targeted at the end consumer, the listener, the potential reader, the potential buyer, not an agent, not a publishing house, not anything of that sort, because these are all published works, but these were the final products. These were the final pitches that were out there and existing in the world. So without further ado, here are the 4 books that we looked at the pitches for, right? Or that I was exposing the pitches for. If you had guessed The Martian, I watched the movie, didn't read the book yet, but you can see that's the original cover. And then this idea that when Andy was creating that pitch, that was his original pitch for the actual book itself, versus you can find later pitches and later elevator pitches that are very similar, but they're altered just a little bit for the later publications, later versions, as well as the movie version of it. So sci-fi, you've got there on the bottom, Ghoul, is a YA graphic novel, and reading this idea that kids are always kind of looking for friends, and what better way to have a freaky, scary friend than a ghost popping out of a graphic novel that you're reading and working on. So that was Casey's story, and it seems like one that is just recently released, and it's one that I've definitely just added to my TBR for this workshop. Iona Iverson's Rule for Commuting, the idea that we as strangers like to kind of, especially on our commute, kind of keep our heads down on the train and not talk to strangers. But what if you broke that rule? And creating that as a rule or a premise for commuting and changing your perspectives on the world was really kind of invigorating for me and interesting and intriguing, versus romance. Who doesn't like a good rom-com? Sounds like a childhood friends, high school crushes. meeting in a laundromat, and you've got some knitting in there. So very kind of fun activity. And so what we're looking through in each of these and understanding is with the pitches, when you're considering what an elevator pitch is or looking at what the elevator pitch is intended to do, we have to understand who those pitches are targeted at. Now, the way that we're going to kind of overview this and work through it in this particular workshop has 3 core objectives that I have listed here for you. So for this workshop, we're going to make sure that we're trying to understand, 1, the purpose of the elevator pitch, 2, defining different types of pitches, so looking at a pitch as a product, and then finally, strategies for writing and crafting your own individual pitches. Now, as a disclaimer, when I'm not writing on an everyday basis, I have a background in communication studies. So my focus is really on teaching. I teach public speaking at the local colleges, and I have over 20 plus years of experience dealing with rhetorical theory, comm theory, communication theory, organizational theory, interpersonal theories, and all the things that are related to why and how we talk to one another. So what I find in those classes and the frame through which I'm going to overview and present this particular course is looking and emphasizing the focus or the importance of the spoken word versus the written word. Now, all of us as wordsmiths, as writers, aspiring and published, and whatever fields of creativity we're at, we are experts in finding the written word. We will toil and struggle over, spending hours, months, days, years, trying to find the perfect word to express those images that we want to pull out of our heads for our audiences. And that's amazing. And it's an amazing skill. But a reader can always revisit those words because they have it printed on the page for them. But when you're doing a pitch, they don't have that luxury. Your audience doesn't have that luxury. So the way I'm going to be framing this particular workshop is really focusing on that spoken word and understanding the power of the spoken word and how it is different from the written word, which is why we're looking at purpose, product, and pitch. So jumping right into point number 1, looking at the purpose, we want to understand, well, what the heck is an elevator pitch? Everybody kind of says it all the time, and we have a clear understanding, but just for the purpose of this clarity in this particular workshop, we want to define an elevator pitch as a short summary. You're going to see me using or hear me using the word idea, project, book. It's all synonymous, and they're all kind of I'm using them interchangeably. And when you're talking about the pitch, outside of our own industry, it is something that's very common in sales for entrepreneurs. So the sales pitch or the elevator pitch is usually this spoken articulation of your project, being you yourself as an author, your book, your specific project, and you want to make sure that you have this concise, short summary that is meant to last the span of an elevator ride. So 1 to 2 minutes, theoretically, spoken and delivered. Your goal with this introduction is always to intrigue the listener, whoever that listener might be. And the assumption is the listener in this elevator, be it a literary agent, be it an editor, a publisher, maybe even a potential buyer at a book fair or an event, you're trying to hook this audience member. You're trying to hook this person and get them to ask you more about your story, about you, about your project, and about your passions. So understanding that as the purpose of an elevator pitch is really connected to this concept of, in communication theory, knowing your audience, right? It's kind of like in banking where you have the CYA policies, right? You got to cover yourself. You got to know who your consumer is. The same thing happens with elevator pitches. And so we're going to explore the concept of understanding our audience through the lens of a strategic communicator, right? You and I in this scenario. And we're going to work on that so that we understand how we can reach our audience through our spoken word, not the written. But we're working on those skills together. Knowing your audience is divided into 3 categories. Understanding the audience analysis, how you conduct an audience analysis, looking at the generic goals of your particular pitches, and then extending that to a very specific purpose of your pitch projects. So in comm studies, and that's just short for communication studies, so if I I don't want to use too much jargon, but when we think about comm studies, when we think about communication, we have to understand who our end user is. In the communication process, we're always kind of simultaneously both the sender of the messages and the receivers of the messages. And as a writer, we understand that transactional process, but writers don't always get to sit next to their readers. So a lot of what we do is unidirectional as writers. We sit there, we write the stories, we publish them out into the world. We hope someone finally finds it, reads it, and connects to our words. With a pitch, you are there face to face or Zoom to Zoom with your potential end user, meaning the listener and the target audience. And it's important for you as a strategic communicator, somebody who's really trying to persuade this listener, that you understand where this person's coming from, right? Put yourself in their shoes. We sit and we try to create characters that readers can identify with, can resonate with. Same thing happens when we are trying to pitch our projects. So in comm studies and in this field and in our discipline, we're going to look at two different aspects of audience analysis. One definitely being demographics and psychographics. So think of it as demographics being all the quantitative aspects, right? Your gender, marital status, job affiliate, political affiliations, where you live, your zip code, your address, things of that nature. Do you own your home? Do you not? A lot of those quantitative boxes you have to fill out in applications, those are all of the demographic aspects of your audience. On the other side, we have qualitative ideas being psychographics. So the psychographics is really things like lifestyle, interest, personality, right? As a reader, does this potential audience member like reading fantasy as a genre? Do they love sci-fi? Are they into historical fiction? What's their favorite food? What's their favorite color? What's their go-to karaoke song? Whatever that is, those are all insights into the personality of the person you are talking to. Now, when we research our literary agents, yes, we can find some of those things. We can glean some of this information from those manuscript wish lists. But even as a writer, if you know who your target audience is, you have to be able to craft an image of who your ideal reader is going to be. And if you're thinking of that ideal reader on both this quantitative and qualitative demographics and psychographics aspect, you're going to have a fuller picture of who you are pitching to, who you are promoting this project to. And that's the first step for any strategic communicator. Anytime you start crafting pitches, it's not just saying, how am I going to whittle down this 100,000 word novel into this one sentence summary? It's about who am I trying to reach with this messaging? And if we take that into consideration, it's going to help us specify our goals and our purpose for the pitch. So audience analysis, demographics, psychographics, very simple, clean. I could talk for hours about that, and we're not going to get into it. So goal. As a communicator, we really kind of identify our communicative messages having three specific goals. So every public speaker out there and every argumentative speaker and every strategic communicator, you're really just trying to either inform, persuade, or entertain your audience. So if you're thinking about this in terms of the pitch, think of your book as being the entertaining component, right? So sometimes when we're sharing snippets, we're sharing quotes, we're sharing scenes from our book, those are meant to entertain and entice a potential reader or an agent or a publisher. We know that at the underlying message of all of those, the goal is that we want to persuade them to pick up our projects, represent us as authors, and then even buy our books at the end of the day. But a lot of this also has to start with informing the audience, informing that end user about what you stand for. Not just you as an author, but what your books stand for and what it is that, without actually like shoving it down their throats, you want to inform them about what the story is meant to be. Understanding this goal and understanding the audience helps us define our specific purpose. So you could see when we're thinking about purpose, understanding the role of the actual elevator pitch, you're going to start with your speech goal, for instance, to persuade, and you're going to add that to the audience, this literary agent, and add a precise description of your project. So you have goal, audience, and description. And those three elements together in the spoken form makes up our specific purpose. So if I know as an author, I want to sit there and I want to persuade this agent to please sign my book, sign my project, I have to know that that is the specific purpose. It's like our thesis statement in an essay. It's what's going to drive the way that I craft and create the specific pitch, which leads me to the second point of what is the pitch itself? How are we going to view this pitch as a product, right? So first, we know what the purpose of the elevator pitch is. We know that we have to think about the audience, consider our goals and our purpose, and that's going to allow us to recognize the pitch as a product. Right? So what we have here, what happens oftentimes within writing in general, you're going to find that there's a lot of different things that we are working with, meaning we are going to see the same core product, but called a bunch of different things. So the elevator pitch is no different. I have here 3 different variations of the same product, but they're just named something a little different. And just like you're trying to decide, we think of when we're putting our pitch packages together, we've got a query letter, we have a synopsis, we have blurbs, we have, summaries. They all have different purposes. And so having recognized who our audience is, what our goal and purpose is in point 1, you can see that if you view the pitch as a product and you understand when you start writing and working on that product exactly what it is the goal is, it's going to help you be able to cater to that specific audience member. And it's going to help you improve the reliability and the persuasiveness or the effectiveness of that particular messaging. So we're looking at 3 different things there. 1, you have a log line. That's something that we often hear in script writing or screenwriting, things that deal with media related projects. So log line, it's just that one-liner, right? The one sentence. Think of it as the tagline. If you were creating a movie poster for your projects, you are still pitching it, but in just one intriguing sentence. So if you think back to the pitches at the beginning with The Martian, it's like astronaut stranded on space has to survive, right? This one simple liner that doesn't always follow grammatical rules, but gets the point across, right? This 1 to 2 sentence summary is really kind of focusing on the plot and the emotional hook. Why should somebody feel invested in reading this story and picking up this particular book or this you as a creator? The log line is that plot and hook. That's it. A simple 1-sentence story that you could easily pitch off to anybody at any moment. And log lines are usually targeted at end users, so people who are going to buy your book at the very end, but some agents might consider and be drawn to log lines as well. When you're expanding on log lines, we have at the center our elevator pitch, which is the name of this particular workshop. The elevator pitch is an expansion of the log line. So as a product, these are still all different marketing tools for writers, whether we're self-published or we are working as part of a team in a small press or even the large presses, you'll have more of a team, a marketing team behind you. But it's helpful for you to understand the difference between the two. So your elevator pitch is one that, again, you can see there is still a summary of your book, your project, but it's targeted and its goal is really to persuade agents, publishers, and readers. Now, if we've looked back and taken that moment to really understand the first step, where we want to know who our end user is, when you create your elevator pitch, it's not a blanket cold email that goes out to everybody. You don't have the same pitch for agents, and that same pitch can't go out to a publisher, and it's not going to be the same pitch that you send to a reader, because while the main essence of your product still stays the same, each of those audience members have a different interest, right? So we're looking at hook, we're looking at characters, conflict, stakes. End readers don't always look at things in that light, right? They're not always assessing your pitch in that manner. They want to know what the gist of the story is. They kind of want to know who the characters are, but they're not interested in the metadata, which agents and publishers are, right? So when you're looking at the elevator pitch as a product, think of it as an expansion of the one line to maybe a 2 to 3 sentence product, but it's still kind of changing and being modified to reach our specific audiences. So always keeping audience in mind. As a communicator and as a speaker, we have to make sure that we do focus on who it is we're talking to, because the words are always going to change. Even though the product stays the same, the pitch is going to change based on who we are trying to reach at that particular moment. So log lines, 1 to 2 sentences, elevator pitch, 2 to 3 sentences, a little bit longer. Now, the final product you see there is the book blurb. And looking at it, it's still considered a pitch because your book blurb is not one that gets read, but it's a multi-paragraph summary. Our book blurbs are those back matter informations, right? The summary description of your books that potential buyers, your actual end user and the consumer is going to be able to be fascinated by the cover of your books, hold it in their hands and read a good solid summary. This is one where it follows yet a different formula than the log line and the pitch, but you're still trying to sell your book to this audience member. So when we're writing the book blurb, consider it a longer, more expansive summary, but it leaves out a lot of key details. You've got setting in there, you have that promo description, but it's really meant to kind of pique the interest of your audience members so that that person holding the book in their hand or seeing the description on their Amazon page or your bookshop page, that they are going to sit there and go, oh, this is really kind of interesting. I really love the way these characters are. I love the world that they're setting up. I don't know the full premise of it, but I've got an inkling of it. How can I make sure that I have to buy this right now because I got to know what happens to these people. You always leave your book blurbs or your back matter blurbs with some kind of cliffhanger so that we don't reveal everything and we're kind of piquing those interests. But all of these 3 elements, these products, variations of the same pitch. So it doesn't mean that you always have to start from scratch when you're writing these, but when we start creating our portfolio or we create like this, all of our marketing materials for our books, we want to understand that there are 3 different aspects or 3 different marketing products that still fall under the umbrella of pitches, right? So recognizing each one works a little bit different, we're like, cool. So now 1, 2, and 3, first, we know who the audience is. Second, we understand this product. We understand our purpose and our products. So now we're going to look and dive in a little bit deeper to the pitch. As a comm person, I deal with persuasion and theories of persuasion. Like I said, I'm a rhetorician by trade, which is just a fancy word for somebody who likes to argue, somebody who likes to look at words, and somebody who sits and looks at the nitty-gritty prep work. Not so much the final product, but leading people and teaching people about the process of becoming a good strategic communicator. So when we're looking at the pitch, giving that overview, I want to show how we're going to achieve this. When we're dealing with strategies for crafting persuasive pitches, first I'm going to understand or define the dynamics of persuasion. We're going to look at common formulas for each of those pitch products that I just introduced and give you some simple steps to create an actual writing exercise. So in our live component, in the after we kind of watch this recorded material, we will be able to kind of work on developing our own pitches and trying to actually apply these strategies and seeing, does it actually work a little bit different? Do I think of it a little bit differently? And am I putting on the cap of a strategic communicator? So strategies for crafting persuasive speeches, starting with dynamics of persuasion. What the dynamic of persuasion means is it's a theory that is brought or stemmed from David Hume, who's a philosopher, and you can see the little citation there. I will have resources available, and I'm going to create like a big little index, so I'll make the slide deck available for all of our viewers, as well as a research file with links to articles and samples to help you on your journey to actually crafting your own amazing elevator pitches. But David Hume talks about, when he talks about persuasion, that's essentially what we're doing as strategic communicators. We are looking to persuade our audiences to act. But when you do that, you can't always shove the information down the audience's throats, which means I can't be obvious about it. I can't be so explicit about my desire to sell you something because people get turned off by that stuff. I mean, Think about getting a phone call from a telemarketer, or if you walk at a county fair and you see all the different booths and they have those sales pitches. It's this idea that they want to pull you in, put the product in your hand, and they're trying to do a hard sales strategy. Now, that might work for some people, but more often than not, audiences are so skeptical of the hard sales tactic. And as writers and as strategic communicators, we don't want to fall into that same trap, which is why I'm introducing the dynamics of persuasion. The way this process works, as you can see there, it's only 4 simple steps. 1, we always want to start with information. This simply means, and it's really, really hard because we're always trying to hard sell our books, but when you're providing information, think of it as the metadata we put in our queries, right? What genre is this? How long is this book? What is, the title of it? What is the basic, fundamental, entry-level information that I can present to you and let you decide if you want to keep listening, right? Information is always the first step of persuasion, because if we present ourselves as authentic, genuine speakers and creatives, we want to just present the information and let the story sell itself, right? Yes, it's not a merit-based world. I understand that. So it's kind of like looking at the world through rose-colored glasses and feeling very idealistic. But when we present information as it is, you're leaving it in the hands of the audience. You're leaving it in the hands of that target reader, right, or target listener to really decide what they want to do with it. So you're putting a lot of faith and trust in them, but that's how communication actually works. Whenever I give you information and I'm telling you something, I can only hope with all my heart that you are receiving that message the way I intended. But I can't control how you as the end user actually interpret that information. Same thing goes with our stories. We write the books, we know our motivations, but someone else, 5, 10, 15, 20 people can read it, 1,200,000 people can read it, and they're all going to have a different interpretation. So we have to understand that as creatives, right? And so we present this information hoping that the information sinks in and that it resonates with that end reader, right? As a communicator, when information is presented authentically, genuinely, without schemes and scams and bells and whistles, that information, hopefully, if it's meant for that target audience, it's going to resonate. They're going to click, they're going to connect to it, and they're going to say, wow, this is really fascinating. And you know that you've got them on the hook, right? Your information leads to triggering or sparking one's imagination. That's why I love writing for kids, because kids, you can put crazy, wild things into the stories, and then they sit there and they just kind of like absorb it all in. But when we get new information, when we're looking at the dynamics of persuasion, information leads to somebody blowing up their imagination, right? Not like physically blowing up your imagination, but it sparks your imagination and it gives you a realm of possibilities. That's what we're doing when we persuade people. Maybe that's why we write fiction. But even in nonfiction stories, perhaps if you look at self-help stories or you look at other people's memoirs, you're getting that base information and it triggers your imagination because it opens up a new realm of possibility for you. When you're entrenched in that imaginative world and you're exposed to the potentials and possibilities of this world, what it does is it stirs up your passions, right? Story of your heart. We as creators all pour our hearts, our blood, sweat, and tears into our work. But that is meant to reach that end user. And when you give them information that triggers their imagination, it stirs up their passions and they have to act. You have all this energy bottled up inside you. And you know that you've got them on the 3rd stage of persuasion, because once your passions are stirred, you need to have them move their will, also read as their butt, their wallets, whatever it is, whatever the final call to action is going to be. If we follow this checklist, if we present information genuinely and authentically, and we spark someone's imagination, and they're really entrenched and they know that they are the ones who are supposed to be reading this, and they are the ones who have to champion it, it's going to stir their passions and get them to move their physical will, right? As speakers, we have to make sure that we also create a call to action, is just specifically, what do you want this person to do? Do you want them to follow you on your socials? Do you want them to please buy the book? Do you want them to sign you? That's the movement of the will. So movement of the will is always connected to a call to action, and it's our final stage of understanding the dynamics of persuasion. So a little bit theoretical, too much theory there, but we try to keep it simple. So how does this apply to the elevator pitch? Well, it lets us understand what the actual formulas are for the pitch. So when I share the slide deck to you, if you like it and you want to copy each of those elements that are underlined, it's actually a link to the original source. So we're looking at the same three products here: logline, elevator pitch, and book blurb. And we're seeing terms now that are probably familiar. When we've ever participated in a pitch contest, we know that you're looking for inciting incidents, characters, obstacles, quests, stakes, right? Logline is just your one-liner that kind of uses this formula with the end user in mind and trying to only kind of cherry pick the best elements of your story. The elevator pitch can be seen, this is based off of Carrie Stevens, she's a YouTuber, but she's also a writer, editor, and whatnot. So her link is available there. She gives this 3-sentence pitch that lets you say, what I'm doing is I'm building on one step to the other, to the next, right? One step to the next, to the next, to the next. You have the who and the what as your first sentence of your pitch, the conflict as the second sentence, so it's expanding on the log line, and finally you're ending with the stakes and, if necessary, providing comps. A brief caveat on comps: recognize that as you start working on your projects, you should definitely have a big laundry list of comps. And yes, in the industry, agents and publishers and editors, they want more recent comps. But when you talk to the general public, they may not know who's cutting edge and who's coming out in the next month because they don't follow other authors the way we possibly do as members of the industry. So you want to have things that can be a little bit dated, things that are a bit more popular in different mediums, things that might be songs, things that are connected to either movies, stories, different types of mediums that are still connected and have or embrace the essence of your actual stories. That's where knowing who the audience is lets you find or select the information that is going to best enhance your chances of success. Right? The final thing deals with the book blurb. So you see a formula there. This was from Book Editor Services, a UK editing service. They have the HELP acronym. So if you see HELP, hook is something that is very, very basic for public speakers, right? Our first goal of any public speaker is to have a solid attention getter or a hook that grasps the audience's attention. Because if the end listener is not interested from that first word or first sentence, it doesn't matter how much work you put into it. They are going to stop listening. They're going to walk away. They're going to kick you out of the elevator, even if it's moving. They honestly probably don't care. If you do not hook your audience member from that very first word, all the work is for naught, right? So we always want to start our book blurbs and then that back matter blurb, and same kind of a theory with the pitch and the log line with this hook and attention getter. You then want to give information by enlightening them, right? I'm trying to teach you. I want to give you this information. Let me give you the basic nitty-gritty of what's happening in this book. And you're pairing that with language that is appropriate for your target audiences. So E and L, enlightening, and language is that information that kind of uses language that's going to spark someone's imagination. And what we do in our book blurbs and the back matter, as well as everything else, is you leave a parting shot. That's our quintessential cliffhanger. We're not going to reveal everything in the back summary and in our blurbs, but we want to use this information strategically to say, you know the full story. They're only going to look at it this one time, possibly, right? What can I do and what can I say to capture their attention, resonate, have the information resonate with them, and leave them on this cliffhanger where they cannot put your work down, right? those are the key formulas that we're going to look at for each of those different products. So based on in our live component, and even as you look at this maybe on a replay somewhere else, you can see how can I use these formulas to craft the pitch product that works for me in this particular moment. So let's try it, right? What do we want to do? When you're actually trying to write, give yourself these 4 steps. First, identify who your audience is. Second, determine the purpose of this particular product. And that means selecting the right pitch product for you, for that moment, for whatever that instance is. It's not a blanket, template cover letter that we just blast out to a bazillion people. Each thing should be tailored and crafted to that specific audience. And once you have those 3 things, go at it and craft your actual pitch, right? So 4 simple steps to actually writing the actual pitch, knowing who the audience is, determining what the purpose is, selecting the format based on the ones we presented, and just try crafting it. Doesn't mean you can't have a template, but you definitely want to work on those elements and be able to be conscientious of those steps as we go along. Last piece of advice, as a strategic communicator, you want to make sure that you're always audience-centered, right? And that simply means that you're aware and conscientious of what the end goal is. If it's to get somebody to like and subscribe, get them to follow you on your social medias, go to your website, take a book, like an advertisement, a sales sheet, get your foot in the door, whatever that goal is. Understanding who your target audience is going to allow you to strategically craft the right pitch for that audience. With that said, we also want to recognize that the spoken word is a lot simpler than the written word. And that's because listeners only hear your information once. You only get one shot to deliver a spoken pitch. Once those words have left your mouth, like thoughts, they are fleeting, they are gone. That person cannot rewind it, and even if they ask you to say it again, you may not say it the exact same way. So remember that as a communicator, the spoken word is way simpler than the written word. That's why we need to KISS our pitches. KISS is an acronym for keep it simple and short, or keep it sweet and simple. Keeping things very, very clean, very easy for the ear is going to help your pitch flourish, right? And you definitely have to practice it aloud. So always think of the audience. Remember, the spoken word is easier, and KISS your pitch. Whew, a lot of information. So what did we go through today? 3 core elements dealing with purpose, which starts with knowing the audience goal and the essence of what the pitch is. Looking at the pitch as a product, so we understand and we're introduced to log lines, elevator pitches, and book blurbs. And finally, seeing strategies and different tools of how we can apply the theories of persuasion to perfect our pitch formulas. All right. I hope you guys have found it intriguing, interesting. Hope it didn't blow your mind away too much, wasn't too overwhelming, but I really appreciate your time for listening. Feel free to follow me on my socials, which I will post again in our Discord boards. There's my website that needs to definitely be updated, but you can always find me Patchree Jones on those socials, or Point Tangent on Twitter X when I do kind of still follow it along. Awesome.
All right. Thank you, Patchree, for that presentation. And for folks who are watching, you can go ahead and work on the exercises over at the Discord. And if you're watching this after the fact, you can look for the resources that Patchree is sharing. So thank you all for attending, and thank you again, Patchree.
Thank you.